Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. Excited to have you join us today. We're going to ask that everyone please introduce yourself in the chat, and in your little nameplate name tag, if you could include what organization you're with, please. See where everybody's from. I know where Laura Civils is from, and Danielle Doza. Happy to see everybody. Middle of nowhere, Iowa.
Middle of nowhere, Iowa.
Yeah. Addie's coming in. Let's say, also, you can put in the chat, what are you most excited for about Earth Month, besides this webinar, of course. I know this is everyone's top Earth Month activity. All right.
No doubt. No doubt.
I know, right? All right. I'm gonna ask again if people don't mind putting in their little name tag on their video what organization you're with, please. And I share screen real quick. All right. I am on not my computer, so can people see a screen?
Yes, you're good.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you. We will go ahead and get started because we have a lot to chat about today. We'll anticipate some more people are going to be joining us as we're chatting, but I'm really excited to bring this conversation called Making the Pass from Research to Practice in Sport Sustainability to the world today. We have got some amazing speakers. We've got Dr. John Casper, Associate Professor at North Carolina State, Benjamin Moll, who is a doctoral researcher at Loughborough University in London, and also volunteer for a research-backed charity in the UK called Pledgeball. Dr. Jessica R. Murfree, Assistant Professor of Sport Administration at University of Cincinnati, and Lauren Rickert, Assistant Director of Facilities and Event Management at Vanderbilt University within their athletic department. We'll let all of them chat in just a little bit and tell you their stories. Wanted to bring a note or bring up this QR code to your attention real quick. If you are not already signed up for the Green Sports Alliance webinar or newsletter, that QR code should take you to a link to sign up for our newsletter so you can be up to date on all things happening with the Green Sports Alliance, who is in partnership with the Sport Ecology Group, bringing this webinar to you today. I will kick it to John in just a second and ask that John give a little intro on the fabulous organization that is the Sport Ecology Group, in addition to telling us about some of your research. But as we all know, what gets measured gets managed. So that's an element of research, but also just understanding, human behavior and why we do what we do. And there's so many different aspects of research that can help inform how practitioners make sustainability happen within their sport organizations. Obviously today, because this is part of the Collegiate series, we're going to be talking through a good bit of how the research of the speakers speaks to the collegiate space, but these lessons can be gleaned and learned and taken for the professional space as well. So like I said, multiple times already, very excited to bring this conversation to you. These speakers are very, very good seems like not a strong enough word, but are quite excellent at what they do. So I am kind of going to stop talking and let them take it away, and we'll kick it around. But the intent of today is to be quite conversational. If you do have any questions that you want to bring up, please shoot them in the chat or send them over to myself or Brad, if you didn't want to ask them publicly, and we will have some time for questions at the end of the conversation. And with that, we will kick it over to John to tell us a little bit about the Sport Ecology Group and then about some of your research early on.
Sounds good. Thank you. First, I'll talk a little bit about the Sport Ecology Group, and then I'll talk about myself. So if you don't know about the Sport Ecology Group, Google us or go to sportecology.org. But we represent a variety of international, we're very international, that's an important part, but an international group of scholars that focus on sport and the ecology in a very broad term. And so one of the things that we are trying to do is to show how research can be applied to a variety of different areas within sport and for sport organizations. So this webinar is a good example of this, where we kind of talk a little bit about our research and how it can hopefully be applied within certain spaces. And so, for example, in this space, collegiate athletics. We also have a variety of different resources on our website that might be valuable to you, especially the research briefs, where all the research that's been done within the sport ecology realm is summarized in one paragraph so that you can make a little bit of sense of it and then access some of that as well. Also, for those that might be in the teaching space, there are some resources for teaching about sport ecology. And then there are a variety of different information about related events, resources for graduate students, etc. So I'll let you go and check out that. But I guess I'm starting this off because I'm kind of the old man. I know I'm the old man in the group. I might be one of the older men in the sport ecology group as well. But my research in the space goes back to really 2010, and really the first publication that I had within sport and sustainability at the time, specific to college athletics, was in 2012. We did the research in 2010. And so I wanted to kind of start this off as kind of a base understanding for where college athletics was at the time and where it possibly might be going in the future. But during that time, there was increasing recognition of the role of collegiate athletics within sustainability realm. So we recognized it was there, but it was really unclear what role athletic departments had with regard to environmental action and what was currently being done. So my colleague and my partner in crime, his name is Michael Fall, he now does more administration, had contacted a researcher who had done some research in professional sport and looked at priorities and action of the professional sport administrators related to sustainability, and approached him about doing a similar study with collegiate athletics. And so that was the start of where I got going. And so the first study we had, we surveyed 97 Division I collegiate athletic administrators. Most of them were either athletic directors or senior associate athletic directors, mostly in facilities for those that did fill it out. And we wanted to look just like, what is the state of sport sustainability? What do they know? What's the awareness of that? So I'll just highlight a few findings and takeaways that we got from that, and then go a little bit further with some of the research that we did after that. But first of all, most of the athletic administrators knew that the university and the college were prioritizing environmental sustainability. And so that was important to see. But only 43% of them felt that sustainability initiatives fell within the athletic department or needed to be done within the athletic department. So they knew there was a high percentage knowing that there is this push, but only 43% of them felt that it was a high or a very high priority within that. A majority of them, so 3/4 of them, felt that there was an emphasis on environmental programs within the department, within the athletic department, would increase in the future. So they recognized that, hey, we need to be doing something more within our athletic department. But only 7% of them had started any type of communication within sustainability or created a sustainability team, either within the university or in their department itself. So very few people were doing much in that area, at least within the athletic realm. And so there are a lot more stats that I can go on that, but some of the big takeaways from that initial study that was that we published in 2012 was that there was this high environmental concern, but there was a disconnect with action. So they recognized that it's here, but they're not doing much about it. There was very little to no communication with the university. And this, like, for example, most universities have a sustainability office, and there was no communication going on there. So that was a big takeaway for me, was like, and kind of led to what I do now within NC State and the ACC sustainability team, is to create this collaboration and communication between the departments. There were huge cost concerns. At that time, sustainability meant expensive. And that's coming down a lot now. But that was a big concern, was how much did it cost, and how would it affect their bottom line? And then there was just a lack of knowledge about sustainability initiatives. As part of that survey, we had a list of all the different sustainability initiatives. We asked them if they're aware of them or were doing them, if they were aware of them. And there was very little that knew about them at all. So that was a good start for what we did. We then, because college sports is not just Division I, we then expanded that research to Division III universities, recognizing that they have athletic departments, but it's a very different monster when it comes to how they're run. And so with that, we did a survey with 78 Division III universities. Some of the things that came out of that study, and I'll just be very brief here, is that the Division III universities, and we compared our research to the Division I, but Division III had a lot more issues with resource allocation or just lack of resources. So Division I might complain that they didn't have a lot of money, but Division III really complained, like really said that there's just no money there. They also said that if there was any environmental initiative decision-making happening, it had to come from the athletic director. So because they're smaller departments, they have less associate ADs. And so the athletic director had to be the one doing that. And there was a greater need just overall for strategic planning and greater knowledge when it came to environmental initiatives. So again, just that lack of knowledge came through. So that with that knowledge, we decided to do a qualitative study where we actually started to interview some of these athletic directors about that. And some of the things that came out of that, in this case, this was in 2015, is that they did not see a direct mandate coming from the university itself. So there was no direct mandate that says that, hey, you need to be doing something within the sustainability realm. And so if there's not that happening, there's not a big priority for that to happen. Also, this is something that I mentioned already, but the sustainability offices had to be the one that was the primary outreach. And so they needed the sustainability people to be talking with them. A couple other things is that if there was anything happening, especially within environmental sustainability, it was because there was a personal relationship that happened within the people that had knowledge about sustainability and the athletic department. So they were doing things together socially. There was some prior relationship that happened, and that most of the time, if there was anything happened, it was based on external events. So, for example, an Earth Day might be happening, and how does athletics relate to that Earth Day? But there was no strategic planning that was happening overall. And I'm generalizing because this is not all Division III universities that came into play. And another important part was the importance of the athletic director for Division IIIs. It's basically it's easier when it's a top down. So if the athletic director views environmental sustainability as important, then they can make it happen. And also just we had the cultural challenges, like sometimes it can be politicized, things like that. So how does environmental sustainability fit in with the culture? And so again, these studies are somewhat old. One thing that I would love to do, if anybody's interested, is to partner up and see how this has changed. 12 years now, at least it's been 12 years. I know technology and the facility side, for example, the perception of LED lighting has completely changed. Back then, it was viewed as crazy expensive. Not anymore. As a matter of fact, it's a point of parity, like everybody has it. So I look forward to hearing more from our speakers, and then I'll come back and talk a little bit about some of the fan engagement research that I've done that's been a little bit more recent.
Yeah. Thank you, John. That is all extremely helpful. And I want to just anecdotally say how I've been able to take your research that you just talked about and put it into practice with something that we did at Texas A&M in their athletics department when I was in grad school here over the pandemic. So you talk about getting the buy-in from top-down leadership, having the Office of Sustainability involved, having a campus mandate, and can say, yes, that is extremely important. So in 2018, Texas A&M as a university released their campus sustainability master plan, and athletics and campus had been in conversations for a number of years trying to figure out how is athletics going to support this? What does that make? What makes sense for them? Athletics does operate really different from campus, but they want to support this, and athletics was part of the creation of the 2018 plan. So it took a few years of figuring out exactly what athletics wanted to do with it. And in 2020, really in earnest in 2021, the athletics department at A&M in earnest started developing their own athletic sustainability master plan, which was released in October of 2023, the first of its kind. And we used a lot of the research that John talked about to kind of inform the approach, like what can we glean from this research to understand how we need to go talk to the people that we need to have part of this process. We also used some of the items in the surveys that he talked about to survey the internal and external stakeholders of Texas A&M athletics to understand how would their ascription of responsibility, who do they think should be responsible for it? What do they think athletics should be doing? What is their level of knowledge about that? And that was really, really helpful to inform the timeline for the metrics that we put in the master plan. So thank you for what you do. Would also love to see that be updated. And speaking of new research coming out for athletics and their initiatives within sustainability, I'm going to kick it over to Lauren Rickert at Vanderbilt to tell us what she's been working on, or what she's currently working on, and maybe an ask to this group to have them fill out your survey.
Hello. I am with Vanderbilt. I am Assistant Director for Facilities and Event Management. I've actually only been with Vanderbilt for 4 months. I'm also a graduate student at the University of Loughborough. And along with my sport duties here at Vanderbilt, I actually brought up in my interview that I was interested in sustainability. So from literally my first week, I was sitting in on our SEC and Friends sustainability meeting. So immediately connected with Lauren when I came here to Vanderbilt. And timing wise, I am in my last semester of my grad program, and I'm doing a sports sustainability course. So I'm doing a research project on what it looks like to be sustainable in athletic facilities. So I really wanted to get into what we are and what we're not doing. And it's kind of taken shape of how I wanted to get at that, because we started out of like, okay, well, let me look at what people are putting out there. And if you've ever tried to look up an athletic website to see what they're doing for sustainability, most of the time you're not going to find anything. So I'm at the point, I actually have just finished for my academic purposes, data collection. And I sent out a survey to every ACC and SEC school. I included people who are on the sustainability side, so campus as well as athletics. And I just sent them a short survey. What are you doing? And what are your thoughts? And bear with me because I don't have 2 screens where I'm sitting. I share an office space with multiple people, so I moved away. So I got thank you word for not working on mobile. I knew this was going to happen to me. So I asked very simple questions. I think the average response time, it's under 6 minutes. It's maybe 5 minutes and 45 seconds. We talked in one of our meetings about getting people to respond to is it the Sustainable Sport Index? And personally, I was like, I'm in, let me do it. Let me get information. And you could feel the eye rolls from other people in the group because they didn't want to invest the time. And I was already thinking about doing this project. So one of the key elements for me in creating this was, how can I make this easy and accessible for people, but also get the data I needed. So there were, majority of these questions were yes or no, with an option to fill out other if I felt that I wanted to glean a little bit more data. And then there was a couple short answers. So simple questions like, are your facilities fully converted or in the process of being converted to LED lighting? Do you have game day initiatives in place, such as zero waste game day or a tailgate recycling team? And I gave them the option to write in if they were doing something else. And let's see, do you have solar panels? Of my 15 respondents, which, 2 of them are duplicates. Only 3 of those schools have solar panels involved or installed. Are you using reclaimed water for any of your water needs? 7 are, 2 have future plans. I asked what they think the most cost prohibitive sustainable practice they've implemented or attempted has been. Composting, purchasing compostable products, upkeep of water, rainwater collection, recycling. The answers run the gamut for this one. What sustainable practice do you feel has had the best ROI? Multiple people had said composting. LED lighting is by far the biggest answer that people feel has had the biggest ROI. I feel like people in this group will know who said this. The creation and implementation of our athletic sustainability master plan. And then I asked if anybody just had anything else to say about sustainability in athletics facilities. It's hard. It's hard. It's hard. People saying that you need to communicate with the campus side of things. And we've had chats in some of these spaces about how getting campus and athletics to connect is difficult. And in my experience, in my short time here, that is difficult. I know I'm meeting with campus in 2 weeks because there's been no engagement from what I've seen. So this started for me as one, I'm getting a grade, yes, but it is important to me to be a part of our sustainability mission here at Vanderbilt and in the athletic space. It is a core tenet of my work in facilities and event management to have sustainable spaces and to be ahead of the curve. So I can't do that without knowing what we are doing or where we can improve. And there's nobody is really just saying, hey, this is what we're doing. Here are all the answers. And so research like John's is amazing. We can totally chat about doing some updated research. But it's not as clear cut as just going to a website or, picking up a phone. There was somebody in athletics who responded being like, I don't know what we're doing. Sir, you are in athletics. These are your facilities. Why don't you know? But if I want to do things here and make an impact here, it helps me to know what other people are doing so that one, I can reach out and say, hey friend, what do you have going on? How did you get there? How did you get the yes? What did that cost look like? Are you spending money on things that aren't really working? And then I can come back to my people that are going to give me the yes and say, this is what they did. These are the contacts they had. And then I can also take this research and I can give it to somebody else and say, here are the things that we have going on in this world. And these are the things, like 25% of people are doing it, but this is how they did it. And this is how we can, like, if we all kind of start looking at it this way, maybe we can get to 45%. Because the next step, the other half of this presentation that I'm going to do is what are the professional sport worlds doing? Like, if we look at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, or if we look at what FIFA has implemented or the IOC, like, compared to them, like, are we lacking in places? And maybe they're not the benchmark, maybe they are, because we have a different goal. We have multi-facilities. A lot of these professional sport worlds are just focused on one, and that's fine. That's their goal as opposed to ours. But if they're implementing something and it works really well, why wouldn't we look at that as something to try to apply to our world? So taking this information, seeing how I can apply it in my little realm of influence, but also seeing how, like, I can package this up nicely and send it out to all my little friends in this area, in this world, and be like, hey, I found this useful. Like, maybe you can make it better for your area as well. Or like, what do you think? And then maybe they can look at it and come back to me and be like, oh, but also, like, this, I see you thought about this. This is what I can add to that. And maybe this can build. You know, maybe we will look at this again in 5 years and the numbers are even better. So that's what I've got.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Lauren. All of that is going to be extremely helpful. As we know, athletics folks can be a bit competitive. And yes, it is very different in the collegiate space versus the professional space, just with the different stakeholder groups, so many more venues, it's just different red tape. And so I'm really excited to see the results of this. And I want to talk about the Sustainable Sport Index briefly in just a second. Because yes, like I said, that competitive nature is something to play off of, but I understand a lot of times in the sport world, there is that apprehension to not wanting to fail. And how do I get it wrong? And so being able to show that there is a community working on this, that it's not that you won't have to be the first necessarily. People want to be the first, great, go for it. We'd love for people, someone's got to be the first. But it does seem like, generally speaking, the collegiate athletic kind of world wants to see somebody else do it and then either say, like, I could do it better, or, oh, now I can do it too. And so being able to kind of aggregate this, I think, is really going to be helpful. So excited for you to share that. And then the Sustainable Sport Index is kind of an expanded version. It's Aptum, the company Aptum puts that out, and it's a yes or no kind of fill in the blank type survey as well. And the eye rolls came from, we talked about it in a group of largely campus sustainability folks, which I know some of you are on here today, who deal with the STARS report from ASHE, which is an extremely labor intensive survey. So I think a lot of our campus sustainability folks get a little bit of like, ooh, when they hear big surveys. But it is that one is definitely way less labor intensive than ASHE STARS is. And it's not just for the collegiate space. SSI is for any ballpark, arena, or stadium. And yes, it is intended to be a little bit more, like, definitely longer than Lauren's, but I think that they'll complement each other really well. So I'm excited to see yours and see where that ends up. Kicking over to Jessica Murfree to talk a little bit more about her research that also has to do with facilities, venues, contracts of things. I actually don't need to intro that more. Jess, go ahead, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Lauren and Green Sports Alliance, for having me. I am excited to share more about the research that I do that focuses on college athletics because, as John mentioned at the beginning, the Sport Ecology Group is an extremely global research consortium, and focusing a lot of my time and energy on international events and sporting needs and climate harm has taken me away from my roots and my background in college athletics. So I appreciate any opportunity and time, I kind of get to come back to the sector of the sport industry that means a lot to me. And it'll force me to spend more time in this realm. It's one that I just really enjoy. And so I guess sort of piggybacking on the components about SEG, we're coming up on the 5th anniversary of the Sport Ecology Group. And so we have a kindergartner on our hands, and coinciding with the start of the SEG Earth Month and really sort of the hype around our field, it's always a good time to sort of reflect on the state of our research, and then reconnect within the industry, because without industry partners, without opportunities to share like this, we're really a bunch of researchers that would be seeking out these sort of opportunities. So building community with all of you is really important to all of us in the continuation of our field, with the hopes that our research then can come back and influence a lot of change on the ground, which is what I really like to do, specifically as it pertains to college athletics. So sort of my first foray into college research started, really a meme is what sparked it, on the social media platform formerly known as Twitter. And at the time, there was a meme that was going around. I'm from Georgia. There's a meme going around that Publix grocery stores were selling cakes for hurricane parties. They were hurricane themed cakes that people could buy in anticipation of hurricane season, when you're either evacuating or holing up in your home with not a whole lot else to do but sort of hunker down and wait it out. And people turn that into opportunities to build community despite what could be potentially destructive and tragic outside. And so the meme was like, governor's issuing a state of emergency, don't worry, we made cakes. And that is what inspired me to start digging into culture and culture shifting around these disasters that are becoming more frequent and severe. So this project that sort of started the ball rolling for me, my colleague Anita Morman at the University of Louisville and I examined college football game contracts across Division I. We looked at about 10 athletic conferences, all FBS schools at the time. And we did an examination of their contract language to determine if these schools and athletic conferences, really the leagues that are governing game performance, are anticipating catastrophic, severe, dangerous, harmful weather events, these manifestations of climate change, in an adequate way that represents what we know to be true about our changing climate. And as you all probably could assume, they weren't. We found a lot of inconsistencies around the contract language, even from athletic programs within the same athletic conference. We were really disappointed in the number of schools representing even fewer states that were contractually anticipating hurricanes as a qualifying event that would cancel, relocate, or postpone a college football game, knowing how valuable and financially significant these events are. And not only that, knowing how destructive these events can be for stadiums and campuses, but the people that are within them, the athletes and the staff that have to evacuate or relocate. There are so many implications that go beyond the environmental harm and the financial damage that influence people's livelihoods and their ability to travel, their ability to be with their family. More and more frequently, disagreements on how these game contracts were drafted saw schools ending up in court over the interpretation of the language. And so not only were we finding inconsistencies that were costing athletic programs upwards of $1 million, but we're also seeing legislative interference, these lawsuits now that are also costing the same programs hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not more, in legal fees, and then in damages in the settlement fee. So when football, being one of the financial lifelines of an institution, becomes threatened by something as significant as a changing climate, the rest of the implications that might not come down to points scored, but come down to whether or not a football game is impossible, has a lot more implications, and more people should be talking about that. As a result, as I mentioned, the whole purpose is to institute change. We did a legal analysis with the goal of influencing what our field looks like in practice. As a result of our analysis, we were able to make legal recommendations for the redrafting of college football game contracts. If that's something that you and your institution are interested in, we're more than happy to take a look at contracts. We've extended the study beyond football to include both men's and women's soccer, making this legal analysis a bit more accessible, have some parity between the gendered sports as well, especially considering the potentially changing landscape of college soccer going forward to mirror the seasonal duration of professional leagues. And in doing so, we've also opened up to conversations with individuals who these contracts would implicate, those who are in facilities, events, legal operations, championships, ticketing. We're having these conversations so that, well, first to gauge, do the folks who are involved in whether or not the game is played know what's happening at a legal level? Or are they just showing up to the event, checking the weather app and hoping for the best? Can we get a better understanding of their take on the language in these contracts? Do they know the present risks? And if not, what can we do to better educate the parties that, that have a role in these contracts? And some of them are extremely extensive, and they list parties from the athletic director and the university's legal counsel all the way down to the marching band and the cheerleaders. So there's a lot at stake. There are a lot of people involved. More people should be involved in these conversations, and that's something that we hope to do through our scholarship. So really the crux of the work that I do focuses a bit less on individual actions in response to environmental sustainability needs, but more of the pressing issues that underscore the reasons why these actions and these initiatives are important. Like I said, the contracts discern whether a football game, for example, is either impractical or impossible. And impossible would mean, based on legal theory, that an object that is absolutely essential to the game is destroyed. And in many cases, that is the stadium. And so even though this was a legal issue, it has so much to do with facilities and events, in marketing, in concessions, in all of the other areas of college athletics. And I would hope to open up the conversation to more parties so that people really know what's going on, because the reality is that Atlantic hurricanes are no longer a Florida, Louisiana, Texas issue. It's a Kentucky, New York, Washington, California. It's a big issue for a lot of states that don't just border the Gulf Coast. In addition to that, some of the things that I like to focus on are really changing the mindset of athletics from being reactive to being proactive. One of the industry responses that we got to the initial survey was that a re-examination of the game contract wasn't needed because the conference had event cancellation insurance, which we're seeing more and more frequently starting to fall through and not really hold up because the environmental conditions under which the policies were drafted are not the realistic conditions that we are living through. And the same goes for the contract language. How this shows up in practice that implicated every single athletic department, whether facing a hurricane or not, was with the COVID-19 pandemic. which almost immediately changed the contract language. And so Laura and Maddie, who are in here today, the three of us wrote a perspective piece on how we can change the status quo in response to a lot of the climate adaptation strategies that currently exist. We used COVID-19 as our proof of concept, showing that when things that we don't expect are catastrophic and change the landscape of sport, it's okay to make necessary changes if we want our industry to persist. The same can be true for climate change and the environmental manifestations of climate change, but it shouldn't take the catastrophe that was the pandemic to institute immediate change across the sport industry. The analogy that I like to use is a leaky faucet, which is ironic because the storms last week, I had a leak. And so now I'm seeing my analogy is true, that when you have a leaky faucet, sometimes it's easier to just focus on the faucet itself, turn the water off. But really the problem that's underlying the leak could be within the foundation underneath your home. And all of a sudden, if we were just focusing on the faucet, we missed the inches of water building up in the basement over time. And that's how we're seeing change happen in sport with respect to climate change. We're doing little Band-Aid fixes to the faucet, but the basement is filling up with water. We're seeing the same thing happen with extreme heat, which is exciting because the focus on athlete safety around traumatic brain injury and some more catastrophic injury and illness, again, with COVID-19, the cultural chatter about TBIs has opened the door for more conversations on extreme heat and athlete health and well-being. Not only athlete health and well-being, but spectator, official, coaches, anyone who's involved. And so thankfully for the culture shift, so that we can talk more freely about what's happening, we can study them a bit more in practice. The focus on that work, though, has largely been on elite and professional athletes. My work on extreme heat focuses more on youth sport, but when focusing on high school competitors, those are the ones who are going to one day put on the college uniform. So understanding how they perceive extreme heat, understanding how coaches and teams respond to extreme heat, and really more importantly, understanding if what parents are willing to do and if there's an environmental tipping point at which parents will remove their child from play because of extreme heat, are all things that could have significant implications for college athletics. So even though I've published a few of those, a lot of the data is ongoing. The models that I've built, I'm replicating in other leagues just to see how many envelopes can be pushed in sport and in response to climate adaptation and understanding of present hazards.
Thank you, Jess. I don't know about y'all, but I'm just sitting here like the number of times. So maybe let's do by show of hands, and then we'll kick it back over to John. By show of hands, either like the reaction hand or if your screen is on, how many people, either work-wise or as a fan, have been affected by extreme weather events when they're trying to go to an event? Concert, sporting event, just if you're trying to do anything, right? Imagine that that is quite prevalent. So we can definitely put this research into practice. But one of the stakeholder groups that is another big one for everyone in sport is the fan piece. So I'm going to kick it back to John to chat about his research on fan engagement, and then we'll kick it over to Ben to talk about his research that relates to that. And then I'll remind everybody, if you've got any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or shoot them over to Brad or myself, and we'll work to get them answered. I can stay on for a few minutes afterwards if we run out of time in this conversation. So John, kicking it to you.
All right, and I'm going to go quick to respect Ben and also to respect questions. So when we get to looking at fans, there's different publics that we have, and there's more than this, but basically students, alumni, faculty, staff, and the surrounding community. And so when we're looking at fans, there's different stakeholders that we have. fan engagement, if you're not familiar with a definition, a broad definition is the relationship between the sport organization and the fan. So it's about a relationship that happens. Why fans matter? Well, there's just the natural burgeoning or basking in reflected glory that comes with watching sports. There's affinity or affinity marketing that comes into place. And so prior research has found that people are more, if you are burgeoning and have this affinity and loyalty, you're more likely to attend and watch games. You're more likely to favor and purchase sponsored products, more likely to wear team and university merchandise, more loyal to the brand. And then the big question mark for us, especially in sustainability, is are they willing to modify or change behaviors? And so that's where we started to get into some of the research that we did related to fan engagement. First was, do they even care about it? And so one thing that we did find is that between 60, and this is a whole bunch of studies together, 68 to 72% of college sport fans expect environmental sustainability efforts by organizations, and only 15 to 14% don't. So there's a lot more that do than don't. Over 60% of our fans want educational opportunities and how to incorporate environmental sustainability practices into their game day and even their everyday lives. So there is a want for what we do. I'm going to pass over a whole bunch of theory stuff. I'll come back to it if we have time. But just a few findings that I have found from multiple projects with different universities. So first of all, most fans do recognize like the branded sustainability programs. So for example, we have Zero Waste Wolfpack here. I've worked at the University of Colorado. I was Ralphie's Green Stampede. People do know these programs. The sponsored initiatives that happen from these programs have high awareness, especially when there's an engagement piece to it. So T-shirts being thrown into the audience or shooting competitions, anything where there's something that adds to the entertainment value of the sport. If there's a high fit, and this gets into values, I passed over the whole value, my whole theory thing, but if the fans value whatever the initiative is, there's more of a they're more likely to receive the messaging. Loyal fans, we think, okay, well, they've got to be really loyal to really care. And as a matter of fact, it does and doesn't matter, but loyal fans have higher expectations for environmental sustainability. They have higher expectations for everything when it comes to the athletic department. But in most cases, there's not major differences on behaviors at the game at home for non-avid fans. So that's something to know. Females are a prime audience for sustainability. They care more, they want more. It's relatively politically neutral as it comes to awareness and understanding of the initiatives. So while they might be very different from a political thing as far as the awareness of the initiatives and what we're trying to accomplish through the initiative, there's no differences between political parties. Also, a big thing is found that these initiatives that we do enhance the profile, not just of the athletic department, but the university as well. So there's a way to gain image enhancement through the university. And then last take, it's encouraged. It has the hardest part is that does this translate to at-home behavior? We found that in most cases, if there's an ascription of responsibility to do these behaviors, there's a high intention. Very few of us have been able to measure direct behavior. We do ask like what behaviors they have at home. I to this day I haven't seen a longitudinal study. I have a colleague at Colorado who wants to do something like that, but I haven't seen it there. So the link to actual behaviors is still not been established, at least within the collegiate realm. And so now I'll pass it over to Ben.
Thanks, Jonathan. Check, can everyone hear me? Lauren? Great. Yeah, so I think ideal timing to jump on what Jonathan's just said there. My research primarily looks at sports fans with this topic of sustainability in mind. I focus mostly on Southern African fans, but I think that's almost an interesting point to begin with, that a lot of my work revolves around sports culture there, which is very, very different, but at the same time quite similar. And then Pledgeball, the charity I volunteer for, is based in the UK and primarily like its operations are UK based. And yet we're talking to you guys. I know a lot of which are stateside, and there's the sort of USA sports culture. And there's this interesting dynamic where across all of these different cultures, landscape, geographies, we have this common relationship with sport, and particularly as fans or supporters, whatever term you want to use. That's quite a powerful thing. It does vary slightly, but there are a lot of consistencies there. So the Pledgeball, the organization founded by a woman called Katie Cross in Bristol, basically realized this about 5 years ago, that there's this interesting community bond that people have with their local sports team, and that maybe that was a tool that could be used to improve people's understanding, or at least engagement with sustainability, but in a very, and almost as Jonathan mentioned there, politically neutral way, and also not to quote unquote educate them, because I think sometimes we all need to educate ourselves, but to just provide knowledge and be more encouraging rather than sort of telling people what to do. So she ran that basically out of her 7-a-side soccer team. I do call it soccer, but everyone here in the UK calls it football, so I'll probably use both words. She started out with her 7-a-side soccer team and found that it had like a really profound impact. So she started to scale, and then she got in touch with a researcher called Mark Deutsch, who was at the time at the University of Brighton, but is now with me at Loughborough. And then they contacted a master's student who was based at the time in Sweden, but is now also at Loughborough, called Jenny Aman. And Mark and Jenny basically ran a pilot study with a club called Whitehawk on the south coast of the UK, and found that over a particular series of months, using the Pledgeball mechanism, which is basically a list of behaviors that fans can look into and engage with, that it had a really profound impact on how people chose to basically live their lives. And these behaviors can range from quite drastic ones, like maybe reducing the number of times you fly per year, trying a vegan meal, something like that, but also tiny things like the recycling, maybe try and get the bus to work, cycle, this kind of stuff. But instead of it coming from a thing of like, you're a bad person if you take the car instead of cycling, which is obviously not true. Some people have like no choice in that matter. It was coming from, it was being put into a social group that people could exchange ideas with each other and communicate and decide what worked for them and what was best for them. And like, that kind of groupthink mentality built, which was really profound. And so instead of, after a few months of engagement, instead of Pledgeball having to almost keep engaging, although they do that because they're trying to keep clubs competing with each other, the kind of narrative goes on beyond that. So it's almost sometimes hard to quantify how powerful those social bonds and community aspects are to sports fans. And then, as I alluded to before, Pledgeball have this league table, so that when you pledge to take one of these actions, the Pledgeball website can track it to your club for the season, and you can basically create, I think, as we mentioned earlier, a sort of chap into that sports mentality of competitiveness about who can maybe try and save the most over a season. And that really brings out like kind of a positive competitive element out of people. And I think the other point that was being raised by the other speakers earlier around, sometimes sports clubs want to do something like this, but they just don't know really where to start. So that's another service that Pledgeball provide, is that you can, they provide the kind of in-house sustainability knowledge and what works, what doesn't work, how to communicate with fans. And I think that's been quite a value add, that we've been able to empower clubs to take sustainability more seriously, and also kind of realize the power that they have over their fans. I mean, Jonathan mentioned earlier the number of things that fans do when they have a deep relationship with their club, but I think it's that what's the Spider-Man adage? With great power comes great responsibility. That's important for the clubs to realize that we are all in this climate crisis together, but that they can have a more proactive role, both with their fans and then more broadly with the fans who live in the community where they're based. So I'll leave it at that.
Oh. Well, thank you, Ben, for sharing all about how Pledgeball has used research to put it into practice already. But I want to kick another question to you real quick. I know we're nearing the end of our time. Again, if anyone's got questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. Can you talk about a little bit about the research that you're doing and how you hope it will be put into practice?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm help sort of consulting with Pledgeball in-house to try and improve the method, because that's quite an important part. We've done a lot of, we've done one ongoing impact assessment to see how we can improve. But then my research is a bit more under like different sporting cultures, because right now Pledgeball's based very much in the UK, and like the British sort of soccer fan is quite a famous and unique creature. And like, I think there's different levels of intensity there. So my research is more down in the Southern African sense, where like the relationships are like similarly powerful, but they're totally different in how you communicate it. And the level of status that athletes hold in those environments is quite different. So there's some nuance to this. So I wouldn't say that like anyone can just do a pledge ball like mechanism tomorrow and it'll work. I think that research element is pretty important. And you know, also when you're being approached by a club, I think to have that kind of good faith element of what we're doing has been rigorously tested is part of that process. Of course, Pledgeball is a charity, so that comes with certain resource limitations. So, and research can be quite resource intensive. So that's part of it. But yeah, I think it may be expanding the landscape of what kind of cultures this would work in, and also to learn where it wouldn't, because you know this is not something that will fix everything as much as I would like it to. But yeah, it's just another tool in the armory that we have to use sport to make the world more sustainable.
Yeah. I love that. I love, and kind of that's the quote right there, a tool in the armory, because there's so many things so many individual things that can be done to help the world, help the planet, help people. And obviously we all love doing that through the lens of sport. And so I'll go ahead and wrap up here. So if people have meetings they need to hop off to, but again, I will stay on. I can stay on for about 20 minutes if anyone wants to stay on and chat a little bit longer. I don't know if the speakers can. I told them there's no pressure. They'll be off after an hour. But thank you so much for coming today. I do have one last slide. If I can turn on share screen. Just a thank you goodbye slide. But really appreciate all of the insights that the speakers brought to us today. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. If you are interested in hearing more about this, I will send a recap email. We'll have a recording linked to this. But if you want to schedule a meeting with me to talk about any of this stuff further, we'll also connect you to the speakers if you want to chat with them as well. But that QR code goes to my specific booking link. Feel free to schedule a meeting with me at whenever you want. If you want to talk about anything sport sustainability, collegiate or otherwise, we're always happy to chat here at the Green Sports Alliance, and that's our whole goal, is to bring this community together. So thank you again to our speakers. Thank you to everyone for attending. I think that's maybe the last wrap up thing I have. Oh, the next collegiate monthly activity in May is going to be a collegiate specific networking session. So if you are a student athlete, faculty, staff, if you are a current representative on a college or university campus, we're going to be doing a networking session. And then in June, we have got the Green Sports Alliance Summit at LA Live. So we'll also send information in the recap email about that. And let's see, we got some chats coming across. Is it questions? Is it people saying goodbye?
Lots of goodbyes, not a lot.
Lots of goodbyes. All right. Well, thank y'all, everyone. Have a wonderful day. Appreciate y'all. Talk soon.
Thanks, Lauren.